Hello and welcome to episode number 41. My name is Torsten Tavel. So today's topic is relationships. What are they? And kind of what I'm going to go through is in this week's topic is really talking about relationships and sort of seeing the different variances of them, and also really talking about like what we think of them and how they show up in this reality. And so it's really interesting, like when we look at, for those of you watching who are in a relationship right now, you know what your relationship is like, and there's all kinds of relationships out there. And it's also like looking at what, when we get into a relationship, what all the sort of expectations that show up and all the projections show up. And it's also playing with that and looking at what what that creates in your world and what that creates in your partner's world. And then also when you're not in a relationship, most people that you talk to that aren't in a relationship, a lot of them are looking to get into one. So sort of looking at what all that is as well. So this whole topic is quite broad, and there's actually tons to talk about, and actually tons to cover in it. And so what's interesting is you get into a relationship, and then also beyond the next thing, or a part of a relationship to is marriage, and kind of talking about that. And that's kind of one of the first things I'm going to touch upon is this piece around marriage, and the actual part is the honeymoon phase. And this happens often in relationships as well, new relationships. You get into a relationship, and people always talk about this honeymoon phase, that there's, it's all good and it's fun and it's easy, and it's a great part of the relationship. And then something changes. What is that something that changes? But something changes, and the relationship is no longer in the honeymoon phase anymore, or the marriage is no longer in the honeymoon phase anymore. And so what is that? What actually is the thing that changes? And so it was something that I was looking at this morning on my morning run. And it kind of, what really jumped out at me is that in the beginning of a relationship, or even in the honeymoon phase of a marriage, there is suddenly this, or the way it is, or why it's called that, is because there's so much space. And there's really so much allowance for your partner that you're with. There's often in that phase, when it's all fun, there's like no expectations, or very little expectations that you have of your partner, and often that they have of you. And then there's also the whole projection, like what your projections, expectations of the other person, and them of you. And then with that all, like how much of that is actually your own? In this reality, in the world that we live in, the society that we live in, when you talk about relationship, there's usually these expectations that society as a whole has, and then also that we have individually. And you may have gotten those from your parents, your friends, your family, wherever you got them from, but they've shown up in your life, and you look at them as a way of doing things. And so there's all these different aspects. And so really the fun part of relationships, where the fun part ends, is when these expectations show up. And you may not even be aware that it's happening, but you notice that something changed, something has shifted, something suddenly the space or the ease has disappeared, and there isn't any. There is no space at all. And so this can happen. I'm sure as I'm talking, and for you that are watching, you will know what this situation is like, this experience, because we've all gone through it at some point in our life. And it may have been a very long time ago, and it may have been very recently. It all depends on, maybe you've been in a long-term relationship and things have changed, or a marriage, or whatever it is. And so, or maybe you've been single for a very long time, who knows? And so what's interesting is this place where these where, for whatever reason, you start expecting something of your partner that you normally didn't expect before. And it's almost like after, for a lot of people, it's after a certain period of time. Also, people that have been in relationships a long time together, like years, and then they get married, and suddenly after a year it's over. And again, what I've come to realize is what happens in those situations, once you're married, once they become married, something changes, and there's more, like there's this expectation, or that because you're married, it's different, something has changed, and that can ultimately create this friction with yourself, and also with the person that you're with. And it can literally destroy a relationship really quickly, actually. And so it's also becoming aware of, like, when you choosing for yourself in that relationship, making sure that things are working, and that they work for you, and then also saying what actually works for you too. And I know for me, in my own world, that that part of the relationship, or that part of being with somebody, is something that I'm probably not the strongest at in communicating verbally anyways, what works for me and what doesn't. And so it's interesting for me to become aware of that, and to see what what I can change, being in a relationship or not being in a relationship with people. And so, yeah, the biggest thing is this like, what if we actually changed it? So what if when you are in a relationship and you start noticing that it isn't becoming a lot of fun, and suddenly there's no space and there's no allowance for yourself and the other person, that you can change it at that point, and do something different, and choose something different, and ask questions, and maybe discuss it with a person to create some a different scenario. And you can do that currently in your life right now. Like, if you are in a relationship, and it may be a little crunchy, or you may be crunchy in it, or whatever it is actually looking at it and going, okay, so what part works for me, what part doesn't work for me? And what expectations do I have of this person? And what expectations do I have of myself in this relationship? And really looking at those questions, and being really honest with yourself about it, and seeing, what works for you and what doesn't. And playing with that and asking those questions can really create a lot of space for you and for the person you're with. And also asking questions along the way. The cool thing about being in a relationship, whether you're married or not, is actually choosing that person every single day. And you actually get the choice of not choosing them if you wish. Another cool thing to play with too is to actually destroy and uncreate your relationship with that person every single day. And what that does is it actually creates the space for something to change, whatever it is that's going on at that particular point in time, to destroy what you have been choosing, and creates the space for something else to show up. So it's really like playing with these playing with these tools and looking at, well, what if you could have a way greater relationship? And so another thing that I've been talking about is just a relationship with somebody else. What about with yourself as well? So this is super broad, like it covers everything. We have expectations of ourselves. We have projections of what we should be like with ourselves. And it's like really looking at all these different facets, because literally this reality, the entire reality is made up of relationships, and really often, really the way it's constructed in this reality, the way it is in this reality, is that relationships are supposed to be about controlling the other person. That's essentially what we've been taught that they are. So it isn't about being an allowance and letting people choose that what works for them. It's really like making them work for you and making sure they do everything for you. Or it's the exact opposite. People are in a relationship and they think it's all about the other person. And then you're not part of the equation. It's just all about the other person. So there's so many different dynamics that show up pretty regularly in a relationship. And so what if it could be different? What if it could be something else? And what if it could, what if it really actually could work for both people? And the willingness to encourage the other person to be themselves and not have expectations for them, and also to be really clear about what works for you and what you actually require in a relationship too. And if you are looking to get into one, that's probably one of the best places to start right now, is to actually look what works for you and what doesn't. And often being in a relationship also makes that clearer. And some people are great, and even just talking about this topic in particular is that most people that are in a relationship, they're like, the honeymoon or the beginning, the fun stage is non-existent. It doesn't exist anywhere, and it's this like really hard thing that people move through sometimes, and that can show up in all kinds of ways. But man, a lot of relationships aren't a lot of fun for people. They still choose it because they'd rather choose than being alone or choosing something else. Though it is a place where a lot of people are, that doesn't actually invite them to choose more in their life. And what if it actually was? Like, what if that was the basis of a relationship, is to have somebody in your life that is there to encourage you and be the space of choosing more, and to be the space and the possibility of creating something different and greater in your world than what you currently choose on your own. And what if that was the basis of every relationship, and that's something that we chose to choose every single day? Like, how different would your life be? How much bigger would you be? And how different would our world be if we started to choose in a different way, and to look at relationships in a different way, and to ask questions in relationships, and to put our barriers down with our partners, and with ourselves too. Like, that really that's another thing. Like, just if we gave our selves the space and the allowance to be greater, what would that create in the world? And so it really is about asking these questions, using different tools to create a greater life, a better life for yourself and everyone around you. And for me, I do look at, what would make something easier, what would make something greater, and then looking at what it would take to choose that and create that. And what if we could take that into the realm of being in a relationship, and how much could that really change the world? And if we looked at and were the space of something greater, what would our world look like today? And would it look the same that it currently is? And what would you have to choose? I always look at what I have to choose. What would I have to choose to change this? Like, where could I go with this? What could I choose different? And am I willing to do that? Am I willing to choose something different and be something different to actually change the world and be part of the change that I know is possible? So those are the questions that I was looking at. And what if you could have more joy and more fun in the relationship that you currently are in, or the relationship that you might be getting into? What else is truly possible in this world, and what else could we truly choose? And on that note, ask some of those questions and play with it in your world and see what shows up, and let me know how it goes. I'm definitely curious to know. So have an awesome day, and we will talk to you later. Bye.